Welcome everyone to the Electrical Culture of Safety Livewire program, where we delve into all the complexities of creating a culture of safety within the electric utility industry. In each episode, we feature interviews with subject matter experts, industry leaders, safety professionals, and field personnel from across the industry, where we discuss ways to develop a collective reflection of the perception, attitudes, and shared experiences of the safety culture within our industry. Welcome to ECOS Livewire. Good to be here with you guys on episode 1 of the ECOS Livewire program. Wow, this is something I've been kind of dreaming of for a while, and with the help of Brent, I think we're off to a good start. So good to have you guys with me. My name's Mike Bahr. I am I guess the host of ECOS Livewire, and I've got my co-host with me, Brent Jeffries from Bierer Meters, and we've got an extra special guest today, I think, for our first episode. I don't think we could have done any better than getting Mr. Billy Martin on with us for our first episode. So yeah, I'd like to maybe start off, guys, with this first episode, and Brent, if you might talk a little bit about yourself and ECOS, and how did it get started, and what's it about, and where's it going?
So I'll start with where is it going. It's gonna bring our industry together as a line team. It's amazing what's already happened. But I've been with Bierer Meters for going on 10 years now, vice president of field operations and safety instructor, and training around the country for going on 8 years now. Our line worker safety and tool competence, entering into number 8. And anyways, skip all that. I met Billy online through LinkedIn several years ago, way before Electric Culture of Safety started. And he basically introduced me to passion and a heart that truly cared for our industry. And at a time when I was kind of vulnerable and I was hurting, just because doing this safety around the country, you start hearing of all these incidences and all these events. Well, what's interesting is he talked about an event that happened in New York shortly just before he talked about situational awareness and losing a couple linemen up there. And I listened to him, and after I listened to him and his message on situational awareness, I actually contacted him and reached out to him. And I think at first he was maybe a little spooked that I might be some young buck that's kind of a strange person.
Well,
I am a little strange. At least the kids think so as well. But anyways, I reached out to him, and about 2.5 years ago, I had this idea that came to me as far as starting Lineman Safety National Webinars, and reached out to some folks as far as having them participate, because we've been giving back back then it was 6 years. We were giving back into the industry freely out of our profits, and we wanted folks to participate and join us because we couldn't do it on our own, and no one can do it on their own, and no one will ever do it on their own. So we have to form a line team. And Billy was very instrumental. And this is him being here today for the first podcast of Livewire is like perfect, because he was very instrumental on figuring up, what are we going to call ourselves? How are we going to do this? Because this is new. No one's ever done this before. And Billy actually was one of the first speakers ever with a 0004 flip the safety dynamic. And man, that video right there, that Lineman Safety National Webinar through ECOS, flip the safety dynamic 004. Oh my gosh. I could watch that probably till the rest of my life here on this earth. And then he comes along and brings 009 practice primes proficiency, tactical safety. And it's like, what the heck, man? And then he comes with 024, moving from human performance to human potential. And I mean, all three of those training videos and learning and instructional videos on this right here, all three of those are just literally mind blowing and mind expanding and opening up a new eye, pineal gland, opening up a new higher consciousness, which, as far as I'm concerned, what Billy has to share with our industry, I call him the missing link, and rightly so, because what he shares is truly missing in this industry, that mindset and that understanding. So, yeah, amazing.
Excellent. Well, I think I think we can all agree we're all here for the same reason. We're all very passionate about safety. We love the line trade. We love the people in the line trade. And we continue to see too many good people get hurt and injured for, and you just have to think that there's no good reason for it, and so we're all collectively trying to figure out. I call it flipping the switch. Getting those and as I said, Bill and I have had some really good conversations over the last couple of days, and I'm really excited to hear what he's got to say for us today. So I just want to give a little bit of background on Bill. I pulled some information off the internet and put this together, and of course maybe he might be able to fill in some of the blanks. But William Martin is passionate about his career as a line mechanic, hot stick, region supervisor. He's been a bare hand project manager, safety director, and then, of course, his current involvement is in electrical safety, just like myself and you, Brent. Bill has numerous articles and podcasts published for Incident Prevention Magazine, great publication. He's passionate about medicine and currently working on a project involving conscious and unconscious priming as it relates to utility and construction safety. So I'm sure he'll better get into that with us as well. He's a retired flight nurse, flight paramedic at North County Life Flight Inter-Facility Scene and Backcountry Rescue Target. His training experience, which includes he's a National Ski Patrol instructor trainer, advanced wilderness life support, and a diploma in mountain medicine. Bill does speaking engagements for critical thinking and situational awareness, electrical safety for first responders, and now team and crew dynamics. Bill has 40 plus years in the electric utility and electrical contracting business, with simultaneous 25 years in medicine. And then, of course, in 2019, Bill kicked off or started the Think Tank Project. So did I miss anything there, Bill?
No, it's weird when I hear you read it, Mike, because it's all in the past for me, and I don't know how all that happened.
Isn't that incredible how yeah. You can, you get to that certain age and you look back and you think, where in the world, how did I get all that accomplished? And it's a remarkable career. So anyway, so tell us a little bit about the Think Tank Project.
So the Think Tank Project formed by accident. I started a small group in our village. So I've been going to, I'm kind of apolitical. I don't like to really debate politics or religion. I'm not even registered as a party. Mm-hmm. But I noticed our local town government was having some trouble making decisions. So I formed a think tank project that met once a month in the library. And it was just to get people to start thinking differently. And the goal was to maybe create a think tank group that the local village could pitch problems to that would be unbiased. Just we'd come up. They don't have to use them, but we could turn something over. And something in my mind said I should form an LLC because of that. And I did. And my wife thought I was nuts, but that's not the first time.
Yeah.
And And then I started writing articles right around the same time for incident prevention. And I remember I got a call from somewhere in Texas. I had written an article and they wanted me to come and keynote a safety conference. And luckily I had the LLC because at least I could use that as the business partner. And I remember them calling me and say, hey, would you come and keynote our conference? I said, well, you're in Texas. They said, yeah. I said, I live in New York. They said, yeah. Isn't there somebody closer? Because I just wasn't used to the idea that people really wanted to hear anything I had to say. But so the Think Tank Project kind of formed by accident as a result of that group. And I won't go into detail, but we did some pretty interesting things around COVID with that group. As a matter of fact, there's a Stewards Corporation, has 336 stores in our region. And because of what we did, they sent an email to the newspaper and simultaneously to me saying, just to let you know, your think tank has changed the policies in 336 of our stores.
Wow.
So that was when I realized that Margaret Mead was right, social anthropologist from the 1920s. She said, never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of individuals to change the world.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that ever has. Right, Brent? And Brent's doing that, right? Because that's what ECOS is. It's a small, dedicated group of individuals, and we have the power to change the world. So that's how that started.
That's right. And look how it's grown and where it's come in a very short time. So excellent. Yeah. Well, one of the things that Billy and I talked about, and it's something that I've worked very hard my whole career. It just seems like, of course, I've been around a long time. I was around when in 1994 when 1910-269 first came out, right? And back then, we were having many more fatalities than we have now. I mean, it was upwards of 100 per year, let alone, the serious injuries, and then of course, 1910-269 comes along and it changed our industry. It was the first time since the beginning of OSHA that we actually had a regulation for our industry. And so it did change things a bit and the numbers came down but it seemed to have plateaued. And so in 2015, of course, we get a revision. We get 1910-269 revised. We get a revision of subpart V. They tighten up things on fall protection and arc flash and a few other things. And it just seems like since 2015, we've still been at that plateau. And I hear this all the time. And I mentioned this the other day to Billy when we talked, but I hear from people all the time, well, maybe we've gotten as good as we're going to get. Maybe we've gotten to that point where, the SIFs, the serious injuries and fatalities are just, we're going to have to deal with it. There's a certain segment of our industry, of our workers out there that just are never going to get it. They're still going to keep making these mistakes and shortcuts. So, and it just seems to me that, with our current regulations and procedures, along with all the training that we provide, Billy, shouldn't we have reached a point where this is not the case? I mean, what are we missing?
So I know Brent, pitch in anywhere you want there, but listen, all due respect, Mike. So we got a lot of years of experience right here, right? And what we're doing right now is we're using our experience to try to figure out what are we missing. And hopefully there's a younger group of people listening right now. And I got to tell you, statistics have proven every generation has a higher IQ than the one before it. So no disrespect, but we're the dumbest guys in the room, right? So these younger generations, there's a mix of a model that we have provided that it's called mirror neurons. People will copy each other. If you cross your arms, somebody will cross their arms. So we're providing a model that worked for us, that these young guys, these really brilliant linemen, seem to be mimicking our model, and it doesn't work anymore. The model is command and control, right? Because my foreman had 40 years, I could ask him anything. But now a combined line crew might have 15 years total, or one guy with 20 years, maybe, if they're lucky. And that that command and control level of a hierarchy experience that worked for us isn't working for the current generation. So what we really need to do is get them to honor how much each lineman knows, and then actually listen to each other, rather than dismiss each other. And I mean, for example, I just came back from Africa. I was rock climbing over 16,000 feet is not without hazard, right? Because you're at high altitude. And I was with a group of people that I put this thing together. I wasn't their guide, but I put this together, and I don't really know them well. But every morning we did a little round, we did a little stretch and flex, and we look each other in the eye, and I told them, I said, well, we need to be sharing with each other what's on our minds, so that it becomes really easy to share that when we get into a tight spot, right? So every morning it was, how you feeling today? Got any concerns? And one guy says, I'm getting a hot spot on my shoe. Great. That's a good time now to look at your foot before it becomes a real serious problem, right? And the program went really, really well. And when we got up into the higher altitudes and into the rock climbing, there was really sharing of information and concerns. And imagine a line crew that right after they do their job brief, they look each other in the eye and they look, any concern today? We're about to go do this. That stuff that they come up with comes from inside. It's stuff they call up. It's not stuff somebody wrote down on the job brief in the cab of their truck. So to me, somehow we have to incorporate and make it okay to create a coach and team environment with our younger linemen, because that seems to work with them. And we have to let go of our older model, which was a hierarchy of control, which was command and control.
Sure. And
so I mean, that's just the beginning. When these guys connect, when these brilliant minds connect with each other, they come up with some really stuff you and I can't even imagine. But as long as we dismiss each other, so this is what it looks like, Mike. You and I are working and say, hey, I'm a little concerned about that. Should be fine. Shut up and get to work. That can't happen anymore. If somebody as bright as you, Mike, has a thought about something, I need to be curious and interested. I may not like you or even agree with it, but I need to be curious and interested why somebody as bright as you has that thought. And if there's a consequence tied to that, we need to ring it out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If we create an environment rich in sharing concerns, that's an environment rich in predicting, because a concern is a prediction of an unwanted outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a bunch of guys. I can tell you, we're going to talk about an injury, a fatality, I think, later. And look at any of the other fatalities. Every fatality had a job brief and a whatever program they decided to do after the event, right? A safety stand down or whatever. So those things that we're repeating over and over again aren't changing the outcome, right?
Correct.
But if we can all of these, there's lots of great ideas and great words of wisdom out there, but if they don't translate to a change in work for these young guys, nothing changes at work.
Correct.
Like you and I go to a movie and we laugh, we cry, we get excited. Then we go to work. Work doesn't change. We might even go back and watch the movie. So there's a lot of cases where the utilities will bring somebody in that's been injured to motivate people.
Right.
And that's really sad, and it is motivating.
Right.
But unless they give them something physical to do at work,
right,
it goes away.
Well, it's just a very short time period that you even remember what that message was. When you go home for the weekend and you spend that weekend with your family, you come back to work, what that motivational speaker gave you, and it pulled at your heartstrings for sure, and you felt bad for what happened, and you might even think, I'm not going to make that same mistake. Well, the mistake that person made is totally different than even your environment. I mean, it's you're comparing, apples and oranges there. And so it's hard to take that and relate that to an actual work experience. And you're right. It's very fleeting.
It's a translation for me. So if when I see Brent do his safety education for switching and stuff, he's got a stick in his hand and he's creating an image and affecting the part of our brain. So there's a part of our brain that doesn't need to study. You're aware of that, right, Mike? Like if I ask you about a serious event in your career or an injury you've had 20 years ago, you can recreate that memory right now, right? When we affect, that's called experiential learning. When we affect that part of our brain, we don't need to study. Yet we think we can set Lyman in a classroom and teaching a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to tell you, in that fleeting moment, to change your timeline, to make it early, different choice, we don't want somebody looking up a rule or a book.
Right.
Right. We want it to affect the part of their brain that's already acting on it.
Yeah.
And that's a tough nut for some people who think that we consciously have to learn everything. We'll never stop training, right? So I mean, all the training we're doing, we'll continue to do, right? Equal potential zones. We need to bring the industry up to date on EPZs and grounding and all that stuff, and that'll continue. But until you believe something will happen to you, you will not mitigate the risk.
That's correct, right? And you know, I teach a lot of grounding courses when you talk about EPZ, and it's still remarkable to me to go in and teach a group of linemen that still really do not fully understand an EPZ zone. They think, well, I'm working between brackets and it's worked for me for 40 years. Well, no, it hasn't. You just never put yourself in a situation where that EPZ zone would have protected you. So, and you know, on the training side of this, Bill, throughout my entire career, and I've worked for some big companies, I've worked for some of the big ones, and it's always been our train. When you talk about training, we have an accident, right? We have a grounding incident. We have someone killed by EPZ induction. And what do? We have a stand down and we train everybody, right? And then send them back to work. We just go over what they've already learned and we continue. Right. And we have another one a year later. And what do? We have a stand down and we do the same thing again, believing that training is going to fix the issue.
So training is necessary, and it's good that you're doing it, Mike, because we need guys like you and Brent in the field to do that kind of training.
Yeah.
But the latest neuroscience is a little scary, is that our subconscious runs a lot of the ship. You know what I mean? The stuff that we're not thinking about. So I do this thing. I might have done it with you yesterday. I've flown for 23 years, and if you can imagine the worst thing to happen to a human, I probably have seen it, right? And while the audience is listening, I've flown a few people broke every bone in their face. Mm-hmm. And I think I did this with you yesterday, but I'll do it again. When I tell you that's like source learning. You're thinking about what it would be like to break every bone in your face. Mm-hmm. But when I tell you how I knew they broke every bone in your face, it affects a different part of your brain. And when I say people would ask me how did I know? And I asked the guy who was laying on the ground, I said, what does it feel like? And he says, I can move the roof of my mouth with my tongue.
Right.
And 90% of the people I say that to in your audience right now, a good percentage of them just touch the roof of their mouth with their tongue. Mm-hmm. That was involuntary and subconscious. And what that means, just like when you burned your finger on a pan as a kid and then created a circuit not to burn your finger, your subconscious's job now is to keep you from breaking your face because it just did an assessment. Now, your brain either prunes or tunes. So if you keep that circuit alive, that'll keep you, but it's unlikely it'll stay alive unless you revisit it. So what if anybody that's been seriously injured or hurt, if I ask them, did you believe you were going to get hurt? They're going to say no, right? But imagine if we could imagine what that looks like and affect that part of your brain before they go to work.
Correct.
So then it gets even scarier, because if our subconscious changes our decision and that thing doesn't happen, how do you measure something that doesn't happen? Mm-hmm. Right? There's that one phrase, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We love easy phrases like that.
Yeah.
That sounds so good.
Yeah.
But how do you manage something that never happens? And how do you measure it?
Right.
I think we're missing, what we need is this younger generation to come to a situation where they believe an outcome is possible. Once you believe an outcome is possible, your subconscious and your consciousness together will start to mitigate that thing from ever happening.
Yes.
And that's way before trying to prevent something that from happening again.
Yeah.
Because tell me, how many unplanned outages have you investigated?
Many.
Right. So that thing that we don't ever want to happen again always happens again.
Yeah.
Right. So no matter what we do with our lessons learned. So I don't know. Is this making any sense, Brent? Am I on the right page here?
Yeah. Billy, it's why I like listening to you, because, you bring apart an aspect that totally we need to open up. And, we tend to open up training books. We tend to open up the training yard, and we tend to open up conditions that are based upon the natural physical situations, hazards that we see, hazards that could happen. But from my understanding, doing the training, be around you and the folks in our industry, my understanding that the biggest issue we have, we're not talking about. And that biggest issue we have is plain and right in front of our faces. It's like, that saying, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Right.
So the forest being the big picture, and the trees are things that we're taught. The trees are things that we're training for. The rule book are the things that talk about what could happen physically. And we've got to create this we've got to create these environments that are safe environments, the EPZ and testing and all these things that we do, proper work methods, these things we talk about, best practices. But to me, we're missing the forest. And that's where you come in, Billy. It's the forest. The forest is right up here. The big picture. The big picture is what's on our mind. The big picture is, did we start preparing for that job that we're going to do the next day? Are we preparing it for tonight? Or what are we eating? What are we putting in our body? Are we getting decent sleep? What are we thinking about when we show up on the job? Are our emotions running the ship? Our emotions and how we feel about our job situation or debt situation or a relationship that might be going through some rough times. Are we focused on those things? Are we fit for duty up here? And that's the forest. I'm telling you all that in all the line work and all these incidences that are taking place, that's what we're not talking about. Root cause analysis, we don't talk about this. I mean, just look at all the root cause analysis. They don't talk about what is in here. And we're it seems like it's almost on purpose. And I equate the reason that we're not talking about it is because of maybe accountability. I don't know. Let's just kick the can down the road. This is the root cause. And you know what? I should have been watching. I should have been participating. I'm the foreman, but they made the contact. They lost a limb. Their life is gone, and their children don't have a dad, and their wife don't have a husband no more. But guess what? I still have a job, and the root cause analysis protects me.
Correct.
That's what I see.
Right. That's a great point. And I talk to crews all the time, and I'll talk to foremen, and I'll say, and I'll talk to them about just what you said, the things that they bring to work with them, the financial issues, their marriage is on the rocks. They got a kid that's a teenager, and they're having trouble with this kid, and he didn't come home last night. He's 16 and he stayed out all night. These are all the things these guys bring to work with them. And very often I'll get a response from these guys that's not my problem. Those are their problems. My job is to get the line built, right? That and you're right. That's an issue. But the root cause was, well, he didn't put his gloves on.
Yeah. So let's just imagine this for a second. What if the most important part of the job brief, Mike, was not the detail that you're trying to go through, that we can't predict everything, but an ability to engage and create synchrony in the group. It's called neurosynchrony, if you want to look it up, or socially enhanced cognition. When we're connected, we operate at a much higher level. Once we start to recognize that we need to sync with each other. So if you stand in a circle after the job briefing, you share your role and concern. Tan Lee from Neurogeneration says our brainwaves start to synchronize because we're making eye contact. That's energy. And when we start to synchronize, we start to notice when somebody's out of sync. And I can tell you, I investigated personally a number of these fatalities last year just to see. And almost every time somebody was out of sync, right? Somebody was not on the same vibration, the same playing field. And maybe it was because of something at home. I don't know. But once we get synced, it's easier to recognize a disruption to that synchrony. But if we're all over, and you guys have done it, you've worked on teams. I do this often when I'm speaking. I say, hey, have you ever, I ask 3 questions. Does crew relationship affect crew safety? 100% say yes. I ask, have you ever worked on a crew you couldn't wait to get off? 100% say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, you ever made a mistake when you're angry or frustrated? 100% say yes. So we're not operating at our highest level when we're stressed or when we're not connected. And the problem with that is the model that our older people in our government are providing is one of dismissiveness, right? The Republicans and Democrats are basically at war with each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And then they're operating. I mean, I ask these younger guys, does our government look smart to you? And they laugh. Yeah. So we don't want to operate at that low level our government is. We want to operate at a high level because we're in a high risk environment. But if we keep modeling dismissiveness to each other, we shut each other down. And I think that's what when I was listening to Brent, that's what was ringing in my head, is that imagine if we can wake each other up, right? Mm-hmm. So that we don't have to like each other. We just have to be curious and interested what you think. And there's 4 words we don't ask linemen, because I ask them all the time, what do you think? Yeah. That next safety initiative that management's coming up with they don't ask the linemen, they just spring it on them. You've had 50 years of it sprung on you, Mike, right? Yeah. 50. So medicine is patient-centered, education is student-centered. It's time we make safety at work worker-centered. So the worker, we come up with a tactic and they try it. We market test it for a month, just like they would their chainsaw and their FR clothing. And then they come back with an evaluation. I don't think this is worth a hoot. Let's dump this and try something else. Or, well, this is what happened as a result of this. Let's tweak this a little bit and do this, right? And I'm really excited because this one small thing, this was from Atul Gawande, the Checklist Manifesto. It's called the activation phenomenon. In operating rooms, they were having a lot of problems. So in the operating room, before they operated, they had everybody state their role and any concern they have. And that made them this experimental group, 80% more likely to speak up during the operation. Yep. So it's already been tested. And I tell the lineman, look, this has been tested, but it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. So let's just try this. I'm going to foster this. I actually visited every crew of this company I'm partnered with, and we fostered it. And they actually changed one of their job briefs recently to write roles and concerns at the end to make sure they don't miss it. Yep. Because what they're seeing is when they start doing that, when I say finger licking, you see the word good in a chicken, right? Right? Because we're connected. Mm-hmm. But all the stuff that they're coming up with isn't on the job brief. It's stuff that they're raising up from their wisdom. These guys are brilliant at their work. They do this work every day. Yeah. So if we can get them to connect and not be dismissive of each other, I think we can fix it from within. Yeah. Because let's face it, the industry isn't coming to save them. It hasn't worked.
That's correct. I spend a considerable amount of time, probably more than I should, in the OSHA database reviewing, what's going on in our industry. And it's become pretty clear to me that most of these reports, when you really dig into the report, and of course, OSHA does a really terrible job of giving us information, right? Some of these reports says a guy went to work and he died, and that's about all you get. It's maybe 2 lines. So now you can, if you dig deep enough, you can find you can find more information on that particular incident, but it takes a lot of work. But what I'm trying to say here is it's become pretty obvious to me that these are simple tasks. These are everyday routine tasks when people are getting killed. I hear all the time, well, Mike, we work in a really dangerous field. So we got to accept that we're going to have some of this stuff. And I've always said BS. We don't work in a dangerous industry. We have an industry with hazards, right? And then when we don't evaluate properly, we don't do the things that you're talking about, then it becomes dangerous.
Mike, the number one killer of our workforce isn't the job.
Right.
The number one killer of our workforce is suicide, drugs, and alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's your most likely of our workforce.
Correct.
Their most likely cause of death.
Correct.
For the age group of 24 to 44.
Correct.
And that has to do with creating a relationship that can heal them. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's one that where they feel like they're connected to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't see. I think that's when I listen to Brent. That's the message I get in my head is that this is much deeper than the work.
Right. It is. And you talked about the job briefing process as well, and that's been a really big frustration of mine for so many years now, because it's become, I'll roll up on a job and I'll get out of the truck, and the first thing somebody does is they run over to the pickup and they grab the clipboard and they ask me to sign the form. They don't do anything other than they know they've got to get that signature on that form. And so, we've turned a lot of things into, this CYA, you have an incident. The first thing the manager grab the job briefing, let's make sure they talked about this on the job briefing. And so I just really feel like I've always been a strong proponent, not necessarily in the job, the form. I don't care about the paper. And you mentioned the other day, Bill, when we talked, you're familiar with a form that's gotten to be like 8 pages long.
It's 11 by 17, 4 pages, but yeah.
Yeah. And the guys know what that is. They know it's something that the company's using to make sure they got their hinds covered. It's a weapon. It's a weapon to come after them, and they know that. They know that.
So I asked this at I spoke at a conference in Western New York, and I asked if the job brief was a tool, and everybody said yes. And then I said, so could you, so the job brief is a tool, and on a scale 1 to 10, it was at least 6 out of 10 being an important tool. And I said, so you have other tools. I said, could your lineman from this company go work on your trucks because the trucks and the work are the same? They said, yeah. Could they use your lineman's tools over here? Yeah. So all the work is the same. The buckets are pretty close to the same, and the tools are the same. Yeah. So if the job brief's a tool, why does every company have a different one?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we're using a lack of logic. And it isn't even logic. When something happens, we go back and tweak the job brief because we think the job brief is what caused the incident. That's called
correct.
Afterwards, therefore, because of it. It's a logical fallacy.
Yeah.
And it's like math. 2 + 2 is 4. That logic doesn't ring. So we're just stabbing in the dark. Maybe if we tweak this job brief, that incident won't happen. The incident happened, but not because of the job brief. So
no, job briefing had nothing to do with it.
Right. So we miss in that whole taproot. We miss the real root cause. We come up with what we think it is because it sounds good to us. But the reality is maybe Joe defaulted on his kid's tuition payment and his mind wasn't on the job today. And maybe other people recognized it but didn't speak up. How often have you been on a job and say, I was worried about that, or I thought we shouldn't be doing that. You've heard that before, right, Mike?
Sure.
So I like, this is one of the things I like to say. It's very seldom a lack of knowledge. It's an inability or a barrier to apply the knowledge we have. All the knowledge exists in these brilliant crews. We just have to remove the barriers so we can release it.
Correct.
Right. And then when they say, hey, Joe, are you with me today? Come on, you with me? You look like you're a little off. And we have that heart-to-heart conversation, because maybe Joe shouldn't go in the bucket today. But we aren't having those conversations.
We're not.
We're driven by the work.
Yeah. A couple of other areas I want to explore. One is, every company out there. I don't think there's a company out there that does not have a SWA, Stop Work Authority program. They all have them. And I think this ties right into everything we've been discussing here. Most of these incidents that happen, most of them, when we're talking about on-the-job injuries and fatalities, the highest percentage of them occur with contact. That's the one that traditionally, for the last 50 years that I've been around, has been the one that causes the most SIFs, right? And in most of the cases, the guy that got into that incident, got involved in that incident, was not alone. There's people around, right? So a large percentage of these happen with people with them. So when they happen, one of two things or both is happening. Either people aren't watching, or they're not speaking up. They're not saying anything. And I found a study that was done by a consulting firm out of Texas, and they went out and they interviewed 2,600 people across the nation in every industry that they, and they compiled all this data. And by interviewing 2,600 people, they said it was a solid 60% that said they would not speak up, even though their companies had Stop Work Authority. So why is that, Bill?
So I gotta go here. And listen, I don't want to offend anybody in the industry. This is just the studies that I've read. So Atul Gawande's Checklist Manifesto, the Activation Phenomenon. Imagine after the job brief, everybody states their role and their concern. Even your apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
That is practicing speaking up.
Sure.
Now, if you want to get good at the violin, you can watch movies and go to concerts. But our brain is concrete. It requires you to practice the violin to get good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear Stop Work Authority and see something, say something, those are really nice phrases.
Correct.
But unless we're practicing to do that, I suggested to somebody who said we have an environment where anybody has Stop Work Authority. I said, great.
Right.
What are you doing to practice that?
Yeah.
And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Monday morning at 10:05, have your apprentice stop the job. See if they can.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start practicing it. But the real fear for me is Stop Work Authority is so late.
Right.
It's way too late, right?
I agree with it. Yeah.
So if we have a connection and we start mulling over these concerns that everybody might have, we shouldn't venture into Stop Work Authority because we've already discussed those things.
Correct.
And when we go to Stop Work Authority, that's the last ditch before something goes wrong.
Correct.
And the odds of somebody who never speaks up to speak up at that moment are little or none.
That's right.
Especially if you haven't practiced. So I'm okay with Stop Work Authority and see something, but tell me what you're doing to practice it. And I'm going to add one. I have a challenge for the ECOS group. I'm just going to say it now. As we move forward, Peter Drucker, if you look him up, he used to say, he's dead now, but he used to say that he was a consultant. And he said, somebody patted him on the back, said, hey, that was a really good meeting, Peter. That Friday meeting was awesome. And he'd say, was it? And they'd say, yeah, it was really good, Peter. And he'd say, great, what's going to change on Monday as a result of this great meeting? And I'm going to challenge everybody in this ECOS movement. Moving forward, please, you guys motivate me. I mean, some of you guys, I tear up. I hear the same story over and over, and I still tear up. I'm very motivated. But please, linemen now don't want something to think about. They want something to do.
Yeah.
So please, if we can just translate whatever that motivation is you're trying to do, some small thing. And we like to come up with a list of 5 or 6 things that we need to do on Monday. That isn't going to cut it. It has to be simple enough that some small change occurs on Monday. So for example, I'm having the crews for 3 minutes at the end of the job brief after they sign it, because of course, once you sign for the job brief, that's the same as when you sign for your dinner or your pair of jeans you just bought, and you're done with that, right? Psychologically, signing is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
But when we pull them back together in a circle, we reunite them before they go to work so they can resync, right? That 3 minutes, I'm watching that 3-minute thing change people. And make them more comfortable. Say, I'm a little worried about this, or later on being able to speak up, or the foreman finds out like around lunchtime, hey, feels like we're out of sync here. Let's get back together and do that again.
Yeah.
Right. One guy did a stop work authority, stop work, whatever you call that, stop work action.
Yeah.
And he said stop work so the crew could resync over a management issue that they were all hot about, so they could refocus on the work at hand and help them focus on the work at hand. So tell me, Mike, when they resynced, what didn't happen because they resynced? I have no idea.
Right. Nobody knows.
Right. But because there's no parades for things that don't happen.
That's right.
Right. And it's hard to measure the thing that doesn't happen. But I think we're missing the boat. If an environment where it's safe, psychologically safe to contribute, and safe to share concerns,
right,
means you're sharing predictions of unwanted outcomes early.
Right.
And if you create that pattern, I think that's a sustainable pattern that can catch fire.
Correct. And I agree with all that. And I feel the same way about stop work as you do. It's this last ditch thing. And I think we all know why it doesn't work, is because at some point in that lineman's career, possibly early on, even if they did bring up a concern, let you take a second-year apprentice and he identifies something that doesn't look right. So he brings it up to his journeyman, his foreman. And what does that foreman do to him? He shames him. He dismisses it. He shames him. He tells him to shut up and just, if I need something from you, I'll let you know. You just took any possibility of him ever bringing up another concern. You just shut her down for, you just taught him to keep his mouth shut.
And it gets worse. Yeah. So I ask people, so you were a lineman, the hammer test for the pole when you're looking at a bad pole?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I talked to linemen about this. This is just an example. What we have done to linemen is, first of all, if your kid cuts himself on his jackknife, we don't put him in cut resistance gloves for the rest of his life. If they walk into the kitchen, burn their finger in the pan, we don't put them in FR clothing, right?
Right.
We tell the linemen they got to be cradle to cradle rubber gloves and sleeves, because evidently we think they're too stupid to know when to do it themselves. So we've created this environment that's not going to change. It's inbred in us. But in the same sense, we expect linemen to fall to the rule. So when I asked linemen, so how many poles have you seen, Mike, in your career?
What's that?
How many poles have you seen in your career?
Oh, thousands, millions.
You can't count. So I would venture to guess you know a lot more about poles than the guy who works at Walmart, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you have it's 8.9 years in our country to get a PhD. You got 50 years. You have 5 PhDs in poles.
Yeah.
Yet you'll go into the woods and you say, "Oh, this is a piece of crap," and you'll get out the hammer and you'll hit it to listen to the sound check, right? Which I love, because that means, that should be fine. Should be, might be, probably, maybe means we don't know. Right. And then you dig down a foot and you drive a screwdriver in. And if I ask you, where did that rule come from? You'll say, well, it's written in blood somewhere, but I don't know. I have any idea.
Yeah. Don't know where it came from.
But the reality is these young linemen are brilliant. They've seen more poles. The only reason the hammer's in their hand is because they already decided the pole's a piece of crap. Yeah. So instead of falling to the rule, they should be moving to fail safely. Right. Yep. So look, this pole's a piece of crap. I got a hammer in my hand. I'm still going to do the test. Let's put 3 ropes on this thing, so if it comes over, at least it doesn't come to the ground.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But instead, we fall to the rule. Now we're safe because we fell to some rule that somebody made up.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so multiply that by the thicker and thicker rule book you and I talked about, and the rules. Every fatality violated a rule.
Correct.
Every fatality had a job brief.
Correct.
Every fatality had a safety stand down. So what I've been working on, and what I'm so thrilled about this live wire, is it's time we discuss the things we're not doing.
Yes.
Not reinforcing the things we're already doing, right?
Yes.
Because we can continue doing all those things. There's a word "and" here. We can continue doing all those things, and we can start trying things that we're not doing.